No, you don't. I mean, that's the neat thing about this game. As long as, especially the dungeon master, but as long as a couple of people at the table know how to play, you can go in really green and
Yes.
just make decisions as you go along. You'll as you play, you start to catch on to the different rules and learn how to make better use of your the options that your character has, and,
Yeah,
and that's fun.
it is. I think this is one of the best times to get into D&D.
Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels and short stories. With me is Sam West, and today we're gonna go over how to build a new character or build a character in the new revised Dungeons and Dragons 2024.
Yep. If you were brand new to D&D and you want to like make your first character ever and you want someone to help walk through the process, that's what we're here for. This isn't going to be like a one-to-one comparison of, oh, what's different from 5 or 4 or whatever. This is going to be just building the character with the current rules, how you do it, what to do, what to look for. Not super deep dives into all the classes or backgrounds or whatever, but just sort of this is the process that you go through. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good to me. Every time I make a new character, in the regular fifth edition, I always go through this whole process anyway. So, yeah, let's do it.
Sure. So this edition, page 33 of the Player's Handbook has a lovely little section that goes all into creating a character. I would say if you want to read it, this is a very useful resource. I don't think you necessarily need to, but I would recommend it. They have a little checklist that we're basically be sticking to. So number one is you pick your class, and then origin. After you finish your origin, you determine ability scores, and then you're done. Because there's other details that are not particularly relevant to making a character. The big important steps are class, background, race, or now called species, and ability scores. And those things all sort of lump together and play together. And it's not a particularly complicated process, even though it may seem very daunting. There's a lot to read, there's a lot to explore, but you really could just pick off vibes and have a pretty good time, I think, playing this game. It's meant to be that way.
All right, cool.
So with step one, we got to pick our class. Am I? I'm here still. You can hear me. Great.
Well, let's go back to step one.
Okay. Step one, we're going to be picking our class. Each of the class has like a likes section. They have a cute little table, the class overview section. The 10 classes that you're picking from are Barbarian, Bard, I think it's 10, Cleric, Druid, Fighter, Monk, Paladin, Ranger, Rogue, Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard. Those are the Dungeons & Dragons classes as they have been for a little while now. You can find little bits on all of them. I think the important thing to keep in mind for all of them is what their primary ability score is. That's what you're going to care about most. So if you look at the table on page 33, it'll say primary ability. You're going to want to usually try and skew a character so that your highest ability score after all this process is done is whatever that is. Beyond that, you're good to do whatever you so desire. Right. There are a couple of exceptions I wanted to note. Monk says you can take Dex or Wiz as your primary. I think you really want to make sure Dexterity is your highest ability score if you're going to play a Monk. And I think for Paladin, says Strength or Charisma, I would again say Strength matters a little bit more to you, much like how Dex matters a lot more to Ranger than Wisdom does.
Right.
So those ones I would make small adjustments to, but otherwise you're going to pick your class, and that's going to sort of dictate the rest of how your character is going to play.
I like that they gave each class a complexity rating as well.
Yeah, I would go as far to say you could ignore that on almost every single one of these. I think there's some lies, just like outright false claims. Like they put fighter in low complexity versus barbarian in average complexity, and I would not say those two classes are meaningfully different in complexity in any way, shape, or form. I would actually maybe say in many cases, most cases, Barbarian is less complex than Fighter.
Mm-hmm.
So the moral of the story is if you're looking at the complexity and you go, oh, Monk sounds interesting to me. I want to be, a Kung Fu character. I want to play, Jackie Chan, or you maybe have an idea you want to be a ninja and monks can do ninja stuff with the Path of Shadows. Don't be scared of the high complexity. High complexity is not something that's to say you can't try it or use it as a first-time player. I wouldn't go as far to say Monk is a high complexity kind of archetype.
No, it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah. I will say there's a difference. there are some classes where you don't have to learn spellcasting, and I do think spellcasting is quite a bit more complex than other things happening in this game. So if you don't want to play, if you're playing for the first time and you don't want to engage with spellcasting, Barbarian, Monk, Fighter, and Rogue are the classes that you can kind of pick between if you don't want to learn how spells work and you do want to play D&D. If you want the middle ground, you could go with Ranger or Paladin. Those two get spells, but don't get as many as the other classes can. Otherwise, you're going to have to learn how spells work, and that is a lot more learning than the other 4 starting classes really have on them. That's what I would say as far as complexity is concerned.
Yeah,
Is that fair
I
and
like
reasonable?
that Wizard and Barbarian both get average.
That's just not true, right?
Yes.
Like, it's not even close. Like, Wizard is way more complex because of spellcasting predominantly than Barbarian is. So, great assault with it all. That doesn't mean, again, if you want to play a Wizard out the gate, spellcasting is very digestible. If you sit down, you read the section, you ask a DM for help, you watch some of our videos, we'll touch on it, I'm sure. If we haven't already, you can watch our spell reviews. We want to know, oh, is this spell good? How does this spell work? We will touch on it and go in depth in a lot of those things. There are resources out there to help with learning spellcasting. But again, if you don't want to learn spellcasting, Monk, Barbarian, Fighter, and Rogue, those 4 classes don't touch it at all if they don't want to. So you can always go with one of those and not have to worry about anything else. So that's character class. They all have nice little descriptions. Even if you don't want to read them, looking through their art is going to give you a lot of inspiration for figuring out what kind of character you want to play. Maybe you're like, oh, that person looks shredded and it's got a giant axe. I want to play this character. Go to play Barbarian. You look at this other character, you're like, wow, they look suave, or they look like a rock star. That might be Bard, right? You can find cool art to inspire you to go down these certain paths. Or if you've got other character concept in mind, maybe you've got a character from a show you've been watching that you want to kind of embody. You can pretty easily translate most characters into one of these classes and have a good time with it, thematics-wise. So we've established our class. That is the most important part of the character. I'm really glad that you start with it in this edition. I'm glad they made that decision. Step 2, we got to do origin. Origin is split into 2 parts. I don't know why they aren't separate steps, because they probably should be. So I will do that. Step 2, we're going to pick our species. I also think they did this backwards. So your species is replaced some other words for it, and eras past. Basically, it means what kind of creature are you? What kind of humanoid are you?
I like race because it was problematic.
Okay. I don't even think problematic is the right word, but we could have that video discussion. I don't know if it'll be that interesting, but sure. It's species now. The species in this game are very streamlined. I like them a lot, and they're all playable. There aren't any of these that I would steer anyone away from. The species are going to give you a small selection of abilities. It's roughly 3 each, and they're going to tell a kind of story as to what kind of character you want to play. There are some that are going to pair better to certain classes. The species, all it gives you are 3 abilities now. It tells you what your speed is, but most speeds are 30, and other than that, it's going to give you, like, if you're a dwarf, you get stone cunning, which can be a cool way to see through the ground using tremor sense. Kind of a neat little ability they reworked. You could play an elf and be super haughty-taughty and get some spells. It's pretty neat. You could do Dragonborn, breathe fire, or gnomes, and, tinker around. Bob, you could play a human if you really want to.
Yeah. Now, you say
these...
you really like what their decisions here. I've heard some complaining that it's too streamlined and like there's no real difference between the species anymore.
That's just wrong. That's just not an accurate take. There's ample differences between all of them. The differences matter now, whereas before the differences were stone cunning is a niche ability bonus. Now it's a real feature that gives you a cool way to engage with the world. Goliaths are going to play and look way different than a Dragonborn is. I think this was a overwhelming success. I think all of these species I rate higher than, on average, any species in the older editions. So yeah, I think go in this, take whatever character archetype you want, character species you want. I think you're going to have a good time. And I will even go as far to say, I really do think most of these species will work on basically any class. I don't think you need to be that worried about taking a species that matches your paladin. You can be a gnome paladin, you can be a fighter, or you can be a gnome fighter, you can be a gnome wizard. All of those characters are going to work. All of their abilities, some are slightly better on other archetypes. Not going to lie to you, like orcs, for example, have an ability called Adrenaline Rush. It might play slightly better on a character like a barbarian or a fighter, but Adrenaline Rush can be useful on a character like a wizard to help you get out of danger. There's going to be good reasons to use these features on a wide variety of archetypes. Don't feel pigeonholed to play, a tiefling warlock. You can play a tiefling whatever you want. Very good decisions. Big fan of these changes so far.
All right.
Do you have any thoughts or feelings about species outside of that? Do you have any disagreements majorly?
No disagreements. I am kind of curious. I haven't read this as thoroughly as you have. Curious. Just tell me, what do humans get?
Humans get a skill, I believe. I will find them very quickly. They get a skill. They also get there's a mechanic inspiration was how it was called before. Now it's called heroic inspiration. You get 1 heroic inspiration when you finish a long rest, which is 1 advantage on an ability check, attack roll, or saving throw of your choice. That's
Nice.
just a handy little feature, yeah. And you get a skill. Oh, and you also get 1 origin feat, which we will touch on in a second. That's another thing that humans get as well, and those are all pretty interesting. So you kind of get to start with 2 origin feats, because after you pick species, you can go and take your background, and the backgrounds give you predominantly 2 things: what ability scores of yours are increasing, and an origin feat, they are called. So there are, I think, 12 in total, if I remember correctly, backgrounds in this game. And I will say this is a point where you want to check what ability score you're increasing, because you get to pick 2 out of 3, and both of those increase by 1 increases by 2, 1 increases by 1. If again I am remembering all of the updated rules correctly, I believe
This is in the backgrounds.
This is in backgrounds.
Okay.
Backgrounds now determine your ability score improvements. So, for example, if we look at the Acolyte background, it has 3 ability scores listed: Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. 1 of those 3 increases by 2 on your character, and 1 of them increases by 1 on your character. We'll do your ability scores in the future, but for now, you want to make sure you write down where those improvements are going. And usually, you're going to want whatever your class's primary attribute was, primary ability score we talked about earlier, you're going to want that to be getting at least a +1 or a +2, because it will help you in almost all the things your class wants to do. This one does very much. Where species, I think, again, doesn't really matter what species you pair with what class. It does matter what origin, what background you pick with your class. So that's the first important note of backgrounds. Second big thing backgrounds give you is skills. So you get 2 skills they're just the 2 that you get. You don't get to pick whatever 2 you want, but they are usually associated with what you would expect that background to do. So Artisan, for example, gets Investigation and Persuasion. You're proficient in those skills. Proficiency is something that you will learn as you play the game, but you will mark down somewhere that you're proficient in these 2 things. We're not going to do it how to play here. We're just doing character building here.
Right.
Makes sense? There are a couple other things you get. You get tool proficiencies usually, so you'll get like a neat little proficiency in a thieves tools or something, or a forgery kit, I think is one of the ones you can get. Those are all little items that can give you some advantages and some abilities to do cool different stuff, but for the most part, they're pretty cosmetic still. You get some equipment, so you can either get gold, it's 50 gold flat, or you get a set amount of equipment they give you. I'd recommend taking whatever the set equipment they give you is. It'll be really easy to just stick that on a character sheet, and you'll have a fine time. And the last,
you get to play with some toys that you never would have picked up with just getting the gold.
Yeah, absolutely. The last and pretty important element of background you get is your origin feat. So if you're a human, well, that's not important. What's important is that you get 1 origin feat from your background. That's what it matters here. And these all vary. They're not all made equally, but they're close enough that you should be fine with any character to have any of these. Some special shout outs. Soldier gets 1 called Savage Attacker, which lets you re-roll a damage roll whenever you're hitting things. So maybe if you're like a paladin or a fighter or a barbarian, you might want to consider Soldier. I think we're going to see a lot of soldiers, because that is a very easy origin for a lot of martial characters that don't use spells, to get a strength and a constitution increase, dexterity and a constitution increase, and get this cool little bonus to their attacks. It's going to be pretty simple to pick up. And you also get 2 relevant skills. So
I see Acolyte gets Magic Initiate. Is
it
Magic
sure does.
Initiate as good as it was before?
Yes, but
wow.
There's a small caveat there, is you get Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma ability score increases. So if you are someone like a fighter who may want a specific feat like Magic Initiate, you're not getting an ability score improvement to a relevant ability score, and I do think you would prioritize increasing your strength score to a 16, for example, than get Magic Initiate. But you could, if you want, take Acolyte on a class like Rogue or Fighter and just accept that you have a lower starting ability score in your primary stat.
Also, it says Magic Initiate in parentheses Cleric. Does that mean you can only choose from the Cleric spell list?
It does. There are different Magic Initiate is mentioned several times in this, I believe, and they do give you different options. So, for example, Guide gets Magic Initiate Druid. I believe there's a Magic Initiate Wizard one. I don't remember off the top of my head which one it is, but yeah, Sage gets Magic Initiate Wizard. So you can get the different Magic Initiates for the different classes. We don't need to dive super into Magic Initiate here, but yeah, the gist of it is you'll pick an origin, try to make sure that origin is giving you the ability score increase you want, and you'll get the associated feat as well. Maybe you look between, well, I could be a sailor or a soldier. Both of them can be strength. I know I want strength. Now then you can check the feats. Do I want tavern brawler or do I want savage attacker? And then you just go to the origin feats section, check them out, read on those two things, and you pick whichever easy. So
All right.
we got a class, we got a species, we got a background. What's left?
Man, backgrounds are so much more important now than they used to be.
Yeah, they're a feat and where your ability score increases come from.
Yes.
It's definitely something you're going to pay attention to and consider and wait a little bit more than other times you may have had to in the past. We're going to end on the last major important section. So that's going to be your class gives you starting equipment, as does your background. We're just going to let that be the way it is. How you determine your ability scores. Your ability scores are going to be how you engage with every element of the game. You're generally going to either do one of three things. Take a standard array, which is a specific set of 6 numbers that you'll assign to your strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, charisma, and wisdom. You will assign those 6 numbers, then apply the modifiers from your background. So if you again took soldier, you could get a +2 strength and a +1 dexterity. You add where you put your strength and dexterity numbers from your standard array in there, and those are your final ability scores. Those will help you determine what you add to rolls. They'll let you do specific elements of the game, like armor class. They'll help you determine your armor class, all that kind of crap. That is one way you do it, a standard array. You might be at a table that does, you roll your ability scores. Oftentimes it'll be 46, keep the 3 highest. So you'll roll 4, 6 dice, drop whatever the lowest number is, total them together, and you can assign 6 of those out to those 6 ability scores. The other way you can do it is called point buy. There are different calculators online you can find that will help you get a lot amount of points, and you can spend those points on certain scores. It's a relatively simple process to go through. I would recommend reading up on it somewhere, or you'll find resources out there for point buy. That will help you do the same thing.
Are all of these like house rules that have been grandfathered in, or are these all in the book?
They're all in the book. So they
Okay,
specify these are the 3 ways that it is done in the player's handbook. And it'll be depending DM to DM, table to table, what mode you choose to go with. I know a lot of tables are ride or die. Everyone rolls their dice. I know some tables roll 3d6 and keep them in a specific order. That's a very fun way to build a character, but it is quite chaotic. There are cool ways.
That's not a good way to do it if this is step 5.
Yeah, you do want to rearrange the steps depending on some factors. But I think for a first tables experience, I would recommend, if you're a DM going, well, I need to help my players build characters in this system, I would recommend doing standard array. I would think just take the standard array that they provide you the player's handbook, players assign those numbers to the different ability scores, and they add the modifiers they get from their background to those scores. They're finalized. And then you're ready to go. That's your whole character. You've gotten a class, you've got a species, you've got a background. Everything else is just going to get filled in from there. Now, there's going to be lots of little elements that come up. What equipment you start with is going to be either you spend gold that you start with, and backgrounds and classes give you gold. You just take the class and or background equipment given to you. You might have to specifically pick some spells.
Right.
Spellcasters generally get things called cantrips, which are free, expendable, cast as many times as you want spells, as well as first level spell slots. You'll probably have to pick some of those out from a large list, do some reading, depending on how much you want to do.
Your martial class is going to be weapon masteries.
Yes.
Those right out of the gate at level 1.
Yep. All of the martial classes that are paladin, ranger, and not monk that don't start with spells all get weapon mastery. So rogues, fighters, barbarians, and rogues, fighters, rangers, paladins, barbarians are the 5 classes that get weapon mastery. Basically, weapon mastery, we talk about it in our weapon mastery video, go watch that, but you'll want to read the equipment, figure out, well, I'll try out this thing, I'll try out that thing, I'll have multiple weapons on me, I'll use these 2 with mastery. It's a thing that you might want to consider looking into again beforehand. You don't really need to do a super deep dive on it before you start playing the game, though. I do think you can just be like, I want a character that uses a sword. I'm going to take a long sword. And you're going to be fine figuring out how it works with weapon mastery down the road. It'll work. It'll do its thing.
Right.
You don't need to have a super great grasp of weapon mastery, I think, to start playing.
No, you don't. I mean, that's the neat thing about this game. As long as, especially the dungeon master, but as long as a couple of people at the table know how to play, you can go in really green. Yes. And just make decisions as you go along. As you play, you start to catch on to the different rules and learn how to make better use of the options that your character has. And that's fun.
It is. I think this is one of the best times to get into D&D. I do think this new book is a great on-ramp there. If you want a more in-depth understanding yourself of all these specific rules we touched on, just reading the first couple chapters of the new player's handbook will give you good insight as to how all these work. There will be basic rules. I don't think they're up at time of release, but there will be free basic rules for this edition out on the internet. You don't even have to own the book at that point to read all of the new text that they're releasing free into the basic rules that are how the game works, how to make a character, all that kind of fun stuff.
And watch more of our videos.
Yes. If you want specific opinions on things, if you want to know how powerful something is, Google it. Go to Caverns Creatures website, read some of my reviews, read some or watch some of the videos of me and Bob talking about things and complaining about things. You're going to see me be negative a lot because I'm critical, but I do love this game and I do think you're going to have a great time with it, even if it may be with some spells that I'm like, that's kind of crap. It's okay. You're going to have an okay time. There aren't a lot of wrong answers anymore. There are some still that I would try and steer new players away from, but for the most part, you can pick, again, any of the new species look great to me. All the new classes very serviceable. They're all going to work just the way you want. I would just, if you're going to take anything away from this that is rules oriented, make sure your background is giving you a 16 or a 17 in whatever your class's primary ability score is. Beyond that, you're good to kind of do whatever you want and you're going to have a good time.
I think you are, yes. All right, well, that was our overview on how to make a new character in D&D 2024. Thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've got any comments or opinions or anything, let us know down in the comments section below. Other than that, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Some more fun stuff. Goodbye.